They threw Tracy Reeves out of Lumiere Café like she was nothing, not realizing she owned the entire city block. The manager, Timothy Williams, stood with his arms crossed, his expensive watch glinting under the crystal chandeliers as he gestured toward the door. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but we have a strict dress code policy," he said, eyeing her soil-stained jeans and weathered gardening shirt with thinly veiled disdain. "Perhaps you'd be more comfortable somewhere more casual." Tracy felt the stares of perfectly coiffed patrons burning into her back as she quietly gathered her worn canvas bag. She could have ended this humiliation with 7 simple words. "I own the building you're standing in." Instead, she walked out with dignity intact but pride wounded, her boots leaving faint traces of garden soil on the immaculate marble floor. What would you do if someone humiliated you, not knowing you held all the power? If you've ever been underestimated because of how you look, hit that like button and subscribe to Jeannie Soul Stories for more tales that prove appearances are never the whole story. Tracy's 1-bedroom apartment was modest by any standard, but especially considering her net worth. Plants crowded every windowsill and surface, living proof that nurturing growth was her passion. The only hint of luxury was a hand-carved bookcase filled with leather-bound journals, her grandmother Susan Gale's meticulous records of building a real estate empire from nothing. Tracy ran her fingers along one journal's spine, remembering the day everything changed. She was 12 when her father Gary Jefferson told her he was leaving. "This new life with Caroline offers opportunities we never had," he'd explained, adjusting his new designer tie. "You could come with us, live in the big house." But Tracy had chosen to stay with Grandma Susan, watching from the modest family home as her father transformed from the man who'd taught her to plant tomatoes into someone who measured worth by status and possessions. "You made the right choice staying here with me," Susan had said, showing Tracy the property deeds that would one day be hers. "Remember, wealth is a responsibility, not a privilege." 20 years later, Tracy honored that philosophy. Her inheritance included half the commercial properties in the city's arts district, but she chose to work as a community garden coordinator, helping create green spaces in concrete landscapes. No one there knew about her wealth except Melvin Bryce, her childhood friend and now property manager, who handled the business side so she could live simply. Across town in a sleek penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows, Timothy Williams swirled an expensive scotch and stared at the city lights below. The view was impressive, the furniture curated by a designer, but the emptiness echoed in every corner. This was the life he'd fought for: exclusive, elegant, impressive. So why did it feel so hollow? Timothy hadn't always been the cold gatekeeper of Lumiere Café. 10 years ago, he'd been a passionate chef with a dream of opening a neighborhood bistro where food brought people together. But when that venture failed spectacularly, leaving him bankrupt and humiliated, he'd rebuilt his life on different values: exclusivity over community, status over passion. Now he managed the most elite cafe in the district, where reservations required weeks of advance notice, and even the bread plates were imported from Italy. Lelia Fisher, Lumiere's owner, had molded him into the perfect front man for her empire of luxury establishments, and occasionally shared his bed, though both knew their connection was based more on mutual ambition than affection. "You've come so far from that pathetic little bistro," Lelia often reminded him, her crimson nails tracing his jawline. "Aren't you glad I found you when you were at rock bottom?" Timothy was examining the quarterly revenue reports when he noticed the calendar notification: "Meeting tomorrow with a representative from MT Properties about the lease renewal." He'd never met the actual owner, dealing exclusively with their property manager. The mystery owner controlled an incredible portfolio of prime real estate, and rumor had it they drove a hard bargain. "Make sure this meeting goes perfectly," Lelia had instructed earlier. "We need favorable terms for renewal. Wear the gray Armani. It makes you look successful yet reasonable." The next morning, Timothy arrived early, arranging the conference room with precision. Italian espresso served in hand-painted cups, freshly baked pastries from Lumiere's kitchen, and a meticulously prepared presentation on why Lumiere deserved preferential treatment in the new lease terms. When the door opened, Timothy extended his hand with a practiced smile that froze in place as Tracy Reeves walked in, followed by Melvin Bryce. She wore simple but professional attire, certainly more polished than her gardening clothes, but nothing that would blend in with Lumiere's clientele. "You!" Timothy stammered, recognition and horror washing over his features. "Hello, Mr. Williams," Tracy said calmly, taking a seat at the head of the table. "I believe you've been dealing with my property manager, Melvin Bryce. I'm Tracy Reeves, owner of MT Properties." Timothy struggled to regain his composure as Melvin unpacked documents from his briefcase. I had no idea. Yesterday when you came into the cafe." "Yes, yesterday," Tracy nodded, her gaze level. "Would you have treated me differently if you had known I owned the building?" The question hung in the air between them, a spotlight on his superficiality. Timothy felt something unfamiliar, shame that ran deeper than embarrassment. It wasn't about getting caught or even the potential business implications. For the first time in years, he felt the discomfort of seeing himself clearly. The meeting proceeded with painful professionalism. Tracy was fair but firm about the new terms, which included a significant rent increase reflecting market values. There would be no preferential treatment. When Timothy reported back to Lelia, her fury was spectacular. "She owns half the district. That garden charity case in the mud-caked boots. Fix this, Timothy. Whatever it takes. Charm her, seduce her, beg her. I don't care. Lumiere cannot afford that rent increase." But as Timothy watched Lelia rage, something shifted inside him. The woman who had once represented everything he aspired to suddenly seemed shallow and bitter. He found himself wondering what Tracy Reeves, who could afford any luxury but chose simplicity, had that Lelia, and by extension he himself, might be missing. That Saturday, Timothy did something impulsive. He drove to the community garden where Tracy worked, information he'd gleaned from a quick internet search. Arriving in loafers and designer jeans entirely unsuitable for gardening, he stood awkwardly at the entrance, immediately drawing attention from the volunteers working the soil. Tracy looked up from the tomato plant she was staking, disbelief crossing her features as she recognized him. "Mr. Williams. Are you lost?" "Please call me Timothy," he said, suddenly aware of how out of place he looked. "And no, I'm not lost. I wanted to apologize, properly, for how I treated you at the cafe." Tracy's eyebrows rose slightly. "And you couldn't do that with a phone call?" "I thought actions might speak louder," he said, gesturing to the garden. "Maybe I could help today. I'm not dressed for it, but—" "We never turn away willing hands," Tracy said after a moment's consideration. "There's an extra pair of gloves by the shed. We're preparing the community plots for spring planting." What began as a gesture of amends quickly became a humbling experience. Timothy's designer clothes were soon smeared with dirt, his hands blistered from unaccustomed labor. But something unexpected happened as he worked alongside Tracy and the other volunteers. For the first time in years, he felt the simple satisfaction of creating something with his hands, something that would nurture others rather than exclude them. During a water break, they found themselves sitting on an old wooden bench beneath a flowering crabapple tree. "You're good with the seedlings," Tracy observed. "You have a gentle touch." Timothy laughed softly. "My grandmother taught me. She had a little kitchen garden behind our apartment building. I used to help her before I could even reach the countertop." "Is that when you first got interested in food?" Tracy asked. "Yes," Timothy said, surprised by the memory's vividness. "She let me pick herbs for dinner. Everything tasted better because I'd helped grow it." He paused. "That's why I became a chef, originally. Not for the prestige but because of how food connects people." "What happened?" Tracy asked quietly. Timothy stared at his dirt-covered hands. "Life. Failure. Fear." "I understand fear," Tracy said, her gaze drifting to the garden where community members of all ages worked together. "My grandmother built her business from nothing after losing everything in the war. When she left it to me, I was terrified of becoming like my father, someone who let wealth change their values." As the afternoon progressed, they worked side by side, conversations flowing more naturally than either expected. Timothy found himself sharing stories of his early cooking days, when passion rather than prestige drove him. Tracy described her grandmother's philosophy about community responsibility. When the garden work concluded, Timothy made an impulsive offer. "Would you come to Lumiere after hours when it's closed? Let me cook for you. Not the pretentious menu items but real food. The kind I used to make." Tracy hesitated. "Why?" "Because I want you to see who I was before I became the person who threw you out," he answered honestly. Neither noticed Lelia Fisher watching from her parked Mercedes across the street, her expression darkening as she observed their easy conversation. The following evening, Tracy arrived at Lumiere after closing. She had dressed simply but with quiet elegance, a modest dress that spoke of quality rather than flashiness. Timothy greeted her not in his manager's suit but in a chef's jacket, the professional kitchen behind him gleaming with possibility. "No staff tonight," he explained. "Just me cooking for you." The menu he prepared bore no resemblance to Lumiere's usual fare. Instead of tiny architectural portions designed to impress, Timothy served dishes from his childhood. His grandmother's roasted chicken with herbs fresh from the garden, vegetables cooked simply to highlight their natural flavors, and a rustic apple tart that filled the restaurant with the scent of cinnamon and butter. As they ate at a small table in the kitchen rather than the formal dining room, the barriers between property owner and manager, between gardener and chef, between past and present, seemed to dissolve. Tracy described growing up with her grandmother after her father left, the lessons in resilience and responsibility that came with her inheritance. "I could live in a mansion," she admitted. "Drive expensive cars, wear designer clothes. But I saw how those things changed my father. How the pursuit of more and better and exclusive consumed him until there was nothing left of the dad who taught me to plant seeds and watch them grow." Timothy nodded, understanding. "After my restaurant failed, I was so humiliated. Everyone said I wasn't good enough, that my food was too simple, my concept too accessible. Lelia offered me a lifeline, but it came with conditions. Be exclusive. Cater to the elite. Judge others as harshly as I'd been judged." "And did it heal the failure?" Tracy asked softly. "No," Timothy admitted. "It just buried it under expensive suits and reservations lists." He looked around the kitchen. "Sometimes I dream about opening a place where everyone feels welcome, where food brings people together instead of setting them apart." Their hands touched briefly across the table, an accidental brush of fingers that neither pulled away from immediately. In that momentary connection, something sparked between them, something authentic that had nothing to do with property ownership or social status. The spell broke when the kitchen door swung open without warning. Lelia stood there in a designer dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, her eyes narrowing as she took in the intimate scene. "Working late, Timothy?" she asked, voice dripping with sarcasm. "Or is this a special service we're now offering to landlords?" Timothy stood quickly. "Lelia, this isn't what it looks like." "No. Because it looks like you're entertaining our difficult landlord in my kitchen, using my ingredients, when you should be negotiating better lease terms." Her gaze swept dismissively over Tracy. "Though I suppose there are many ways to negotiate." Tracy gathered her purse, cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "Thank you for dinner, Timothy. I should go." "Tracy, wait." Timothy started, but she was already moving past Lelia toward the exit. "Don't forget our discussion about your future, Timothy," Lelia called after him as he moved to follow Tracy. "Some opportunities only come once in a lifetime." Tracy avoided Timothy's calls for the next week, returning to the isolation that had become her comfort zone. She threw herself into garden work, trying to forget the connection she'd felt in Lumiere's kitchen, and her own foolishness for opening up to someone from her father's world. Meanwhile, Timothy moved through his duties at Lumiere with growing disillusionment. Every time he turned away a potential customer for not meeting the dress code or overheard wealthy patrons complaining about trivial matters, he felt a piece of himself wither. The elegant dining room that had once represented success now felt like a beautiful prison. The breaking point came when Lelia cornered him in his office, perfectly manicured nails tapping impatiently on his desk. "I've been patient, Timothy, but this has gone on long enough. Whatever fascination you have with that woman needs to end now. She's leveraging the lease to manipulate you, can't you see that?" Lilia's voice hardened. "It's time to choose. Your career and everything we've built together, or this gardening phase." Timothy looked at her. Really looked, for the first time in years. "What exactly have we built, Lilia? A place that turns people away. That judges worth by appearance. By bank account. We've built exclusivity. Excellence. Didn't your little bistro failure teach you anything? The masses don't appreciate quality. They need to be kept out so the right people can enjoy the experience." She leaned closer. "Don't throw away everything you've accomplished for some woman playing poverty when she owns half the district." The words crystallized something for Timothy. "She's not playing at anything. Tracy is the most authentic person I've ever met." He stood up. "I'm done. With Lumiere. With turning people away. With measuring success by exclusion. You'll never work in fine dining again," Lilia threatened. "I'll make sure of it." "Maybe that's exactly what I need," Timothy replied, removing his manager's blazer and placing it on the desk between them. What neither knew was that Tracy had arrived for an unexpected meeting about building maintenance issues. Standing outside Timothy's office, she'd overheard part of the argument, but not all of it. She caught Lilia's accusation about playing poverty and Timothy's response about being done, but missed his resignation. When Timothy emerged and saw her there, the hurt and anger in her eyes told him she'd misunderstood. "So that's what this was about?" Tracy asked, voice tight with emotion. "Getting close to me to negotiate better lease terms? Make the simple landlord feel special so she'll be generous?" "No, Tracy, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly. You're just like every other person who sees me as either a disappointment for not flaunting my wealth or a target because of it." Her voice cracked slightly. "I thought I saw something real in you. Someone who understood value beyond appearances." "You did," Timothy insisted, following her toward the exit. "Tracy, please." She whirled to face him, years of pain breaking through her careful composure. "You're just like my father. Appearances are all that matter to you. The right clothes, the right address, the right connections." The accusation hit Timothy like a physical blow, unleashing his own buried truth. "I've been living someone else's life for years because I was too afraid to fail as myself again," he admitted, voice raw with emotion. "The suits, the exclusivity, turning people away. None of it is me. It's armor I put on after my restaurant failed and everyone said I wasn't good enough." They stood facing each other, both breathing hard, both finally stripped of pretense. "I don't know who I am without my grandmother's legacy," Tracy confessed quietly. "I hide behind her philosophy because I'm terrified of what wealth might make me become. And I hide behind Lilia's success because I'm terrified of failing on my own terms again," Timothy responded. But the honesty came too late. The distance between their worlds seemed unbridgeable in that moment. Tracy walked away, and this time Timothy didn't follow. Weeks passed. Tracy met with developers about the Lumiere space, since the lease would be ending. The plans they presented were sleek and profitable, a high-end boutique that would complement the district's growing luxury market. It made perfect business sense. Yet each time she reviewed the proposals, she felt strangely empty. Timothy struggled to find new work, discovering that Lilia's influence ran deep in the culinary world. His inquiries about positions at other restaurants were met with regretful declines or unanswered calls. He found himself cooking simple meals at a homeless shelter, rediscovering the basic joy of feeding people who were grateful simply to eat. One afternoon, Tracy was sorting through business documents when she found a folder Timothy had left behind during their lease discussions. Inside was not contract information but a detailed business plan. His dream for a restaurant that would serve multiple purposes: a training kitchen for disadvantaged youth, a community gathering space with affordable options, and a showcase for local farmers and producers. The same day, Timothy received an unexpected package. Inside was one of Susan Gale's journals with a note from Tracy. My grandmother believed in second chances. Maybe you should read about hers. The journal detailed Susan's early struggles, how she'd built her first property investment with borrowed money and sweat equity. But more importantly, it revealed her philosophy of using privilege to create opportunity for others. If you're blessed with abundance, she'd written, your obligation is not to hoard it but to create more seats at the table. These exchanges sparked separate but parallel journeys of reflection. Tracy visited her father after years of estrangement, finding not the wealthy tyrant of her memory, but an aging man filled with regrets about what his pursuit of status had cost him. I thought I was building a better life, Gary Jefferson told her, looking around his ornate but empty mansion. Instead, I lost the only things that mattered, you and your grandmother. Timothy, meanwhile, began visiting Tracy's community garden members, learning more about her vision and how she quietly funded improvements throughout the neighborhood without taking credit. She could live like royalty, one elderly gardener told him, but instead she makes sure we all have a little piece of paradise to grow in. After a month of contemplation, Melvin took matters into his own hands. You're both miserable, he told Tracy bluntly. And you're both too stubborn to make the first move. He arranged for them to meet at the empty Lumiere space, now stripped of its luxury trappings. When Tracy arrived, Timothy was already there, sitting on a lone chair in the center of the barren dining room. He said simply, standing as she entered. She responded, the awkwardness between them thick but not impenetrable. They were different people than when they'd last stood in this space. Tracy had begun stepping more confidently into her role as a property owner, no longer hiding her position but using it thoughtfully. Timothy had rediscovered his passion for cooking without pretension, finding joy in feeding people rather than impressing them. I have a proposal, Timothy said after a moment. Not romance, he added quickly, seeing her expression. At least, not yet. A business partnership. He explained his vision for transforming the cafe into something that would serve the community while honoring excellent food, a training restaurant employing people from disadvantaged backgrounds, connected to a community cafe open to all. I've spent weeks refining the business plan, he said, but I need a partner who understands both worlds, someone who values community but also has business acumen. Tracy studied him for a long moment. Why should I trust you with this space? With this dream? Because I'm finally being authentic about who I am and what matters to me, he answered. And because I think you're ready to do the same. Tracy took a deep breath, then offered a small smile. I like your business proposal, she said, but I have a counter-proposal. She stepped closer to him. Why not both? Both? Timothy asked. The business partnership and the romance, Tracy clarified. I think they complement each other nicely. The transformation of Lumiere into Roots and Branch became a labor of love in every sense. Timothy and Tracy faced countless challenges, skepticism from former patrons, financial pressures despite Tracy's resources, and Lilia's continuous attempts to undermine them by spreading rumors about food quality and service, but their complementary skills created something neither could have built alone. Timothy's culinary expertise blended with Tracy's community vision. His understanding of excellence without exclusivity merged with her philosophy of accessibility without compromise. They worked side by side, converting the formal dining room into a warm, welcoming space with both premium tables and community seating. The kitchen was redesigned to function as both a professional workspace and a training facility. Garden boxes appeared on the previously ornamental patio, supplying fresh herbs and vegetables. Their personal relationship deepened through the shared purpose. They challenged each other, supported each other, and gradually healed each other's old wounds. Their first kiss happened late one night in the kitchen, after a disaster with the plumbing turned into unexpected laughter, both covered in water, both finally able to see humor in imperfection. The night before opening, facing final permit delays and a last-minute staff dropout, they nearly gave up. Maybe Lilia was right, Timothy said, exhaustion evident in his voice. Maybe you can't build something excellent that's also accessible. Tracy took his hand across the prep table. My grandmother used to say that anything worth building requires both strong foundations and constant adjustment to changing conditions. She squeezed his fingers. We have the foundation. The rest is just problem solving. They worked through the night, adjusting, compromising, and ultimately finding solutions that strengthened rather than weakened their vision. The grand reopening day dawned bright and clear. Timothy stood in the kitchen with his diverse team. Former shelter residents now in training positions, culinary students who couldn't afford prestigious schools, and two experienced chefs who had left high-end restaurants seeking more meaningful work. Tracy welcomed the first guests, a deliberately diverse mix of community garden members, former Lumiere regulars curious about the transformation, and neighborhood residents who'd never been able to afford the previous establishment. The biggest surprise came midway through the lunch service, when Gary Jefferson arrived, looking nervous and out of place, despite his expensive suit. "I wasn't sure I'd be welcome," he told Tracy when she greeted him at the door, "but I wanted to see what you've built." He looked around at the vibrant, inclusive space. "Your grandmother would be proud. I was a fool to chase what I thought was a better life. You've created something meaningful from her legacy instead of just preserving it." Their reconciliation wasn't immediate or complete, but it opened a door that had been closed for decades. The final test came when Lelia Fisher arrived, clearly expecting to find failure. Instead, she discovered a thriving establishment with a waiting list and buzz that her exclusive venues hadn't generated in years. Tracy approached her table with quiet confidence. "Thank you for coming. I hope you'll stay for dessert. Timothy's apple tart is exceptional." "Why are you being nice to me?" Lelia asked suspiciously. "I tried to sabotage you." "Because everyone deserves a seat at the table," Tracy replied simply. "That's the whole point of what we've created here." 1 year later, Roots and Branch had become the heart of the district. Timothy mentored new chefs from diverse backgrounds while creating seasonal menus that honored his technical expertise without unnecessary pretension. Tracy had expanded her community development vision, using her position and resources openly but responsibly. The space that had once excluded Tracy now welcomed everyone from business executives to garden volunteers. Each day, people who might never have crossed paths elsewhere shared tables and conversations over food that nourished both body and community. On a quiet Sunday morning before opening, Timothy and Tracy sat at a corner table, drinking coffee and planning the week ahead. Their hands were intertwined on the table, no longer the property owner and the manager, but partners in every sense. "Did you ever imagine this is where throwing me out of a cafe would lead?" Tracy asked. "Never," Timothy admitted, bringing her hand to his lips. "I thought success meant keeping people out. You taught me it's about bringing people in." The door chimed as their first customer of the day arrived, a young woman in worn clothes who hesitated at the threshold, clearly unsure if she belonged in such a beautiful space. "Welcome to Roots and Branch," Tracy called warmly, rising to greet her. "Your first time with us?" The woman nodded nervously. "I just moved to the neighborhood. I probably can't afford much, but it smelled so good walking by." "Everyone can afford something here," Timothy assured her, pulling out a chair at the communal table. "That's the whole point." As they watched their new guest relax into the welcoming atmosphere, Timothy and Tracy exchanged a look of quiet understanding. The walls they had built to protect themselves had become prisons, keeping others out, but also trapping them within their fears. True connection had only become possible when they both found the courage to be authentic about their pasts, their privileges, and their possibilities. Their journey had come full circle, from exclusion to inclusion, from judgment to understanding, from performance to authenticity. The simple woman thrown out of a luxury cafe, and the status-obsessed manager who ejected her, had transformed not just a restaurant, but each other and their community. What masks are you wearing that might be keeping real connection at bay? Has someone's true identity ever surprised you? Share your story in the comments below. And if you believe in second chances and authentic connections, make sure you subscribe to Jeannie's Soul Stories for more tales that touch the heart and remind us that beneath our carefully constructed facades, we're all simply human, seeking understanding, belonging, and a place at the table.